Shark Sports Radio begins right now. A Celtics fan and a Lakers fan on the same frequency? Oh, this should be good.
I think ultimately the Celtics find a way to hang banner 18 in 6.
In a world where sports media, lifestyles, humor, and commentary collide.
First time since signing LeBron, the Lakers have said, we don't give a shit about LeBron. We have to worry about the future.
Let's take a dive into this tank.
So let's talk about the tournament. It is, we got the March Madness bracket, left and right. We're looking at an East region, West region, North region, South region, you name it. There's a lot of different teams in the mix for the different regions, but one that pops out to my eye and it makes me wonder why the hell the committee decided to do this is, my goodness, the East region. That thing is absolutely stacked. Let's talk about it. You got Duke, right? You got UConn. You got Kansas. You got
Michigan State, UCLA, Louisville, St. John's, obviously. I mean, even the 8 and 9 matchup, which Ohio State and TCU are both playing really good ball, right? Ohio State almost knocked out Michigan.
Yep.
They've been playing well, and TCU gave everything Arizona could handle before they got knocked out in the Big 12 tournament. So, Shark, interesting statistic. Obviously, there's only 16 teams in this region. 6 of them have coached in a Final Four game.
That's impressive.
And then you think about, obviously, the national champions with Rick Pitino and Dan Hurley. There are only 2 coaches two active coaches with multiple national championships, and they're both in this region.
Yeah.
Bill Self, Rick Pitino, Dan Hurley, all in this region.
Yep. So the East is stacked. I mean, when I was thinking about it, watching Selection Sunday, I was like, how can the committee do this? There's no way that you can make this happen. And I was talking about this earlier today. We're looking at let's see here, the St. John's, and you're telling me you get St. John's and Kansas in the second round of the March Madness bracket? Are you freaking kidding me? And this is no knock on UConn, but even for St. John's to be a 5 seed is absolutely insane. They won the Big East. They dominated teams out of the conference. They beat UConn, right? And they beat UConn in the championship game. So it's warranted for them to at least get the 3 or 4 seed. So I don't like the 5 seed in the way that this is placed, because it's Big East heavy. It's Big Ten heavy. And guess what that means? That means bad news for the rest of the East. And that actually means bad news for the rest of the bracket too. But, just to kind of talk about the Midwest region, we got the Wolverines, Iowa State, and then Virginia as the number 3 seed. And then you got the West region, Arizona, Purdue, and Gonzaga. The South region, you got Florida, Houston, and Illinois, which is your region where you'll be going to Tampa. So what sticks out to you when you look at the different regions on the bracket?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the blue bloods that are just loaded in that region, as you talked about in the East. I think the South is interesting just because I think it is pairing up really nicely for a rematch of last year's national championship. And I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves there, but no disrespect to the other teams in that region. I know Illinois is really good. But I just look at that. I think an interesting storyline is Arizona. How many times have they been on that 1 or 2 line and have even failed? They haven't won more than 3 games in an NCAA tournament going back to, I believe, 2010, when they pulled off the upset with Derek Williams and that team over Duke. And then they played UConn in the Elite Eight with the Kemba Walker UConn team, that obviously national champs. And they haven't been to a Final Four since, I think, 2001. So Arizona, for as great as we think about like one of the powerhouses, and I don't want to say blue blood, but you think about, they're always in the conversation of oh, they're so loaded and they have this talent and it doesn't matter. I mean, since Lute Olson's left, they have been in pretty good shape and they just can't get over that hump. So you wonder if this is the year. And I think it's interesting because the other teams in that region have the same issue.
Yep.
Purdue, aka Purdue, Matt Painter in March is just never, doesn't come
Craps
through.
his pants. Craps his
And
pants.
then
Yep.
you look at Gonzaga, and they have yet to get over that hump, winning it all. And then, Wisconsin, another team that's going to be a dangerous side. I don't want to, but I look at that region. I think those are the teams of like, they just never bust through. They always fall short. So it's interesting. And then lastly, in the East, sorry, no, we already went over that with the Florida Houston thing. But yeah, I think it's a lot of interesting potential matchups as not to look too far ahead.
No,
but and then Michigan. I'm sorry, that was the last region with Michigan.
Yeah,
in the Midwest.
And I agree with you when it comes to like teams being teasers in this tournament. It's always funny because everybody's like, oh, like you're gonna have a Cinderella team, at one point. No, the teams you can circle on the calendar are, yes, Purdue. You can absolutely circle on the calendar Michigan State going far in the tournament. They've proven that they can. Michigan is always a top-notch, performing team. Florida, contending champions. But when I look at this tournament ticket, it's really not about the teams. I'm looking at this as a loaded player tournament. I mean, when you talk about AJ, DeBuncet, when you talk about Darren Peterson, when you talk about Darius Akoff,
yeah,
like you're talking some big time talent in this tournament. And what I think is really, really surprising to me too, and like if you look at the NBA draft last year, you can probably pinpoint a handful of guys that could probably be going in the first round, maybe the top 5, maybe the top 10, right? At this point in time, you're having elite talent, young talent come out of the woodworks too. And, if I, may talk about Bennett Sturts, for example. Bennett Sturts was, he plays for Iowa, right? But he played for, Drake last year. And he led Drake to that victory, the 11 seed versus the 6 seed. And I think it was, I believe it was Michigan, right? The 6 seed at that time. So you're talking about big time performers. Like we're not talking like years past where you'll have 1 or 2 guys come in out of the woodworks. No, you're having some top tier talent go toe to toe in big ass huge games. And you're going to see it. And this is why it's so exciting with March. And I talk about this on previous podcasts, but it's true. If you look at, the teams that are led by, guys like Akoff, for example, who's going on a tier, an absolute tier. He just scored 49 points, against Alabama. It's just one of those things where it's all about momentum. It's all about momentum heading into this tournament. And if you believe it, if you look at the, championship winners of their conference, they have momentum and they have the ability to focus on the mindset of winning every single game. And a lot of that this year is due to different components like coaching, obviously. But for me, if I'm looking at this tournament and what it's going to be built around, it's going to be NBA ready talent that is going to be right in front of your eyes on the biggest night of their lives every single night. And that's what I'm looking forward to. I don't really care about the coaching side of it. I care about the players. This is the biggest moment of their life, especially when you look at freshmen, when you look at sophomores, how young they are, how young they're performing. I mean, you look at AJ and the way he's been playing, he's the top leading scorer in the NCAAs. He is the guy, right? But then you got a guy like Darren Peterson. Then you got a guy like Cam Boozer. I mean, you got so much talent that it just puts a big smile. I see it, Ticket, a big smile on the face because it's, St. Patrick's Day tomorrow. We got the first slate of games coming up this week. It's just carrying on and on and on through the week. And this tournament is up there, which we will get into on the S&T bracket challenge momentarily. But like I said, Ticket, when I look at the players in the mix, who do you have eyes on going into this March Madness?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to deny, as you talk about A Cup, what a performance throughout the SEC tournament and a loaded SEC with a ton of bids, obviously getting into the NCAAs. Obviously AJ Dinasta with BYU. I think there's some, Cameron Boozer, I think, is the best two-way player. Darren Peterson with Kansas, of course. I think there's a really interesting storyline potentially, as we'll get into it, with Zuby Ejiofor. Let's not forget he started his career at Kansas, so the potential matchup there is exciting. He's the Big East Player of the Year and was dominant, obviously against UConn in the Big East championship game. And hats off to Rick Pitino and St. John. I'm just going to say that because I have a man of class and integrity.
Love it.
Yeah, it was an outstanding performance. And yeah, I mean, I think there's a ton of players, and you talk about March, and we think of sometimes the little guys, the little engine that could. I think Braden Smith with Purdue is someone to keep an eye out as well. Let's not forget he was, part of the Zach Edey team that got to a national championship game against UConn in recent, just was it 2 years ago? So
2 years. Yep.
And then Tennessee as well. They have an outstanding young freshman with Nate Amont, who is very capable of filling it up. So there's just so much talent, and it's exciting. And Shark, I'm just ready for the games to tip.
Yeah, I am too. But it's just, I want to tell the committee that next time they do this type of situation with the East region, like, let's be careful with that. Like, let's be delicate. Let's try to fit the regions and make it evenly balanced, right? So, and I know it's the NCAA.
I think there are a lot of household names, Shark, but I hear what you're saying. And like I said, it's crazy to think that there's not that many active coaches that have had success in the tournament, and a lot of them are in that region.
Right. Yeah. And if I may, with Gonzaga, for example, a team that's always, in the mix and always, wanting to win in big championships. But when you look at what they've done this year, 30-3, great team, but they did lose to St. Mary's, right? And if you're betting on these brackets, or if you're looking at, who to select, you have to acknowledge that that's a big game in that moment. And if Gonzaga can't seal that, what does that mean for their success for this year? Now, this is not a knock on UConn, because UConn has proven that they can win on the biggest stage. You have to acknowledge that when you lose your championship, your conference championship, that involves preparation. That involves technique, tactics, throughout the game, being able to adjust, right? And I think that's something that has to come with the players being at such a young age. And we talk about NIL money, how you spend all these different dollars on different players to make it work. Well, I'll give you an example. Providence had one of the best recruiting classes, and look what it turned out to be. So it doesn't sometimes, add up or make sense. It's all about having a complete package. So if you're looking at, who to select, right up there, a team like Duke, right? Like that, they're an outstanding team. But then you have a team like UNC, who's right there as also a team that could potentially make a run. So it's all about class. It's all about, where they came from, how tough that conference is. Look at the strength of schedule. Have they played anybody tough throughout the year? Because that absolutely matters. Anybody who says it doesn't is crazy. It does matter. What doesn't matter is KenPom. That's what doesn't matter is all these stupid ass rankings when it comes down to offensive efficiency versus defensive rating. Like, none of that really matters. What comes down to it is the complete package, all phases of the game. It's coaching, it's talent, it's the ability to grind out games, it's the ability to adjust throughout games, it's the ability to get through adversity. That's what matters in March. And that's why this is looked at one of the best tournaments in all of sports, because of that purpose. And if we talk about potential Cinderellas, right? We can get into the 12 seed Akron, the Akron Zips. Those guys have been around for quite some time, especially when it comes to March Madness. VCU Rams. I talked about South Florida early on. Those Bulls are just full of excitement, right? And it really does breathe from their coach. Brian Hutchinson has done a really good job, allowing himself to build a culture, player development, get in front of the guys' faces, hold them accountable, right? Everything that a coach kind of stands for. High Point Panthers, right? They've been on a tier since the start of the season. Like, they've been red hot. And so, like, if Miami to Ohio, yes, they lost their only game recently, but UMass, but Travis Steele, had a terrific year with that team. And there's also like rumors that Travis Steele is going to take the Butler job. So, I think Miami just needs to stay in line, and that's something. Distractions will happen, right? They're inevitable, which is cause for concern when it comes to NIL purpose and the different coaching transactions that happen throughout the course of the year. But it's important to stay level-headed, move forward into the tournament, take it game by game, and not think past ahead. And talk about top seeds. Tiki, you talked about it earlier, right? Purdue is always a team that is usually one and done, or sorry for you. Arizona, same type of thing. Michigan can kind of teeter with that. And there might be surprises. I think there'll definitely be surprises in this bracket. But when you feel confident with what you look at in the different regions, like what kind of stands out as a potential Cinderella, when you're looking at these different regions?
Yeah. So, I mean, where you want to start? Start with out east, or what?
Well, let's start off east.
All right. So out east, to be honest, I don't see a lot of. South Florida, I think, is capable of an upset in the first round over Louisville. Mikel Brown has been out with the back injury, and you talked about your boy Hodgson with South Florida. By the way, what a glow up that would be. He was just coaching at Arkansas State.
Yep.
And in a 2-year window, he can go from Arkansas State to a potential coach in the Big East. So he's done a terrific job, obviously, at Arkansas State to get the opportunity at South Florida, and then immediately has made an impact with the USF Bulls.
Yeah. But he also coached with Nate Oates at Alabama. Yeah.
Yep.
So,
and Buffalo.
And
which, ironically enough, is where this game's going to be played. So,
yes.
Louisville, South Florida. I think South Florida is capable, but I don't see them making much noise beyond that. Here's the team that I think really could give somebody trouble, and I'm not gonna pick it, but I do think TCU is capable of giving Duke everything they can handle.
Yeah.
David Punch is an absolute force. I still think you saw it at times in the ACC tournament. Duke was still struggling, obviously, with the injuries that they had late in the season. I think TCU with Jamie Dixon, who has another coach who never really seemed to get over that hump, and I put him in the similar category as like Rick Barnes and Matt Painter, where he's had some good teams, especially going back to his time at Pitt when Pitt was in the Big East and just never breaking through. But he's a great coach. He's won a lot of games, and he's got a lot of talent. Jaden Pierre, by the way, former PC Friar.
Yep.
He's their starting point guard. So you have a veteran, guard presence. David Punch, like I said, is a real force. That TCU is going to muck it up, and it's going to be a game that Duke, I think, is going to get everything they can handle in.
Yeah.
But really, overall, I don't see a lot of upsets in the East.
So when it comes to the East, I have two matchups on my mind. I'm looking at the second round, St. John's and Kansas.
Yeah.
That matchup could be one hell of probably one of the biggest matchups in the second round. And like when you look at Kansas, Darren Peterson, hell of a player, right? Versus a complete team like St. John's, that's going to be tough because St. John's really has the makeup. They're on a run. We talked about momentum going into the tournament. That is so key. And so I think Pitino in that scenario, he knows he's on the biggest stage. If not, he was already on the biggest stage in Madison Square Garden. So there's no pressure when it comes to tournament play with this guy. He finds a way. I really think Kansas has to be very, very careful because if they let that game get out of hand, defensively, St. John's can come after you in every single way. You talk about Rick Pitino in his days at Louisville, right? He was just a force when it came to having his guards in your face. Even last year, right? When you just look at the components of a game, when it's getting in your head defensively, grabbing defensive rebounds, grabbing offensive rebounds, like forcing yourself to create more opportunities. That's a team like St. John's that will make you pay. And Bryce Hopkins, as much as I hate to say it, he could potentially play a huge X factor, in that matchup. And if I'm looking at another team very quickly here, it is the South Florida and Michigan State second round as well, because I do think when you got a coach like veteran coach like Tom Izzo, who loves to get into it, tenacity, gets into it with the officials. When you look at Brian Hodgson, he's a guy that everybody has eyes on right now, looking at chops. With either Syracuse is looking at him too. A lot of schools may be looking at his services, so he's probably wanting to play for something at this point, in his career. And so having a victory over Tom Izzo in the Michigan State Spartans, I can definitely see that being a huge second round, in the East as well. Let's flip it over really quick to the Midwest region. What do you think there?
Yeah. I mean, overall, and I know I, mentioned it a little bit, or alluded to it a little bit earlier. Right now you look at how Michigan has been playing, and it hasn't been great, right? Like they've struggled down the, obviously Purdue handled them in the Big Ten championship, but prior to that, Ohio State gave them everything they could handle. Wisconsin took them down, and they needed a buzzer beater from Rosenberg to pull that one off. I don't really trust Alabama. Texas Tech is an interesting one, and I wish they were healthy.
Yeah.
Obviously, Toppin being out is a huge loss. Really, the team that I think, and I know I had mentioned that Rick Barnes is someone who doesn't really break through, but I do like their draw.
Me too.
I the one team that really could be the mover and shaker here is SMU. I think SMU is capable. They're getting BJ Edwards back, and between him and Boopy Miller, you have two excellent guards that can score the basketball. They have a really good perimeter defender in Pierre Jr. So I think SMU is going to really give Miami of Ohio everything it can handle in that round of, the play-in game, or to get into the round of 64.
Yeah.
I think the winner of that Tennessee SMU game, I think will go on a run. And I want to give Virginia credit because Virginia's won a lot of games this season, and they're not getting a lot of respect. The Ritter has been a great player for them, but I really do think it's a ripe opportunity for one of those teams to break through. Now, Iowa State is the team I'm looking at to come out of this region, though, Shark. I just really like the Cyclones. They play great defense. My only concern with them is they're not the best free throw shooting team,
Yeah.
but I think defensively they're so strong that it's hard to not imagine them. I just think Michigan looks vulnerable. So I'm looking at Iowa State to probably, I'm going to say Tennessee. Uh, Tennessee SMU is a tough one, but
That's very
you know,
different.
I like Iowa State to come out of this one. Michigan, I think, is really going to get everything they can handle, assuming they get that far. The team I'm also would put on upset watch is Alabama.
Yeah.
They don't play a lot of defense,
No. They don't play
and
a
when you
lick of
don't
defense, that
and when
team.
you don't play defense, it concerns me. So, uh, I I know I'm throwing a lot of things out there, but Iowa State's the team I'm looking at in this region to get out of it.
Yeah.
Um, I do think Texas Tech might be the team to pick off Michigan, and we'd look at a Texas Tech, Iowa State, Big 12, two Big 12 powerhouses facing off in the Elite Eight here.
Yeah. Well, you know what's funny, as I was like looking at the bracket, going back and forth on it, like I tend to agree with you. Texas Tech, rightfully so. They had a pretty good season. They could have been a little bit better if guys were healthy, right? But when I look at Michigan, I look at we talk about the different regions and their capabilities of being a hot region versus a cold region. This is kind of a region where I kind of think it's a little bit of a cakewalk with Michigan. Now, to your point, like Michigan has had their woes of late, right? They need to find a way to create some type of rhythm going into the first round, right? But when I look at that bracket, right, and I look at, you got Georgia, St. Louis, like, no. Texas Tech, Alabama, you talked about they can't play look at defense. They might be out first round against
So they could
offense.
score. They could score 100 and give up 100. Sure.
No.
I mean, they're
I know, but I've witnessed a team that can do that, and
Yeah.
that's not ingredients for winning basketball.
I
That's
agree
not.
with you.
And I think it's, if you look at a two ticket, I look at defensively, right? And when I look at a team, you're right, Iowa State, those guys are absolutely filthy defensively, absolute dogs. People think about like Kentucky with Calipari, right? Well, no, like now when you look at Pope, like he's doing exactly what they should be doing defensively. Guys are in great defensive positioning. If you look at, the way that the SEC has been built, Florida's a tough team, Alabama's a tough team, and Kentucky can hold their own. So when you look at the conferences too, I think it's very important when people look at these, is like, what's their regular season looking like? When you look at the top conferences, you think of, the SEC, Big Ten, Big East, like, maybe not Big East this year, right? Because there's only 3 teams in the mix,
Right.
But when you look at it on paper, sometimes when you look at that with the Big East, yes, it doesn't look pretty heading at the end of the year. But when you look at the SEC, who you have to go up against, the ACC, who you have to go up against, the Big Ten, the Big 12, like there are conferences, acknowledged in this tournament that absolutely play a factor. But I just don't feel like, Michigan is a team that I have eyes on possibly being upset. But I do like that Iowa State pick a lot, because I think they're one of the best teams in the country right now. I really do.
And the name to keep an eye out for them as well as Tamian Lipsey, who's the homegrown kid out of Ames, Iowa, and Jamarian Bateman is a freshman that in a class full of a lot of loaded freshmen. He's a guy that's come up with some big shots for them in big moments. Doesn't, the stats don't jump out at you with him, but I've watched Iowa State play a bunch. He just seems to make plays late and plays beyond his years. The free throw shooting worries me for that team, but they're so good defensively. They rebound. They just do everything right fundamentally.
Yeah.
And I think they're the most stable team. I think they're the best team in that region. Michigan, I can't get over the fact I think they peaked early. That's to me is, I always worry about, and I can't get over what I saw. And I don't want to take anything away from like Ohio State and Wisconsin and Purdue because, they've had, good seasons, and Wisconsin's a team that has, beat Michigan earlier in the year. They
Yeah.
beat Illinois. They beat Michigan State. So
Michigan
Wisconsin's
State.
capable of doing some things.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, yeah, I think Iowa State's the best team in that region.
Yeah, and Iowa State, if you look at it from like years past, I mean, they've always been consistent, right? They've always had some tough dogs. I for example, like you remember Abdul Nader days, like those guys were just absolute forces. Like, and I can they're just a consistent program, and that's something
Gannon.
yeah, exactly. They're not talked about enough. They're not. So let's talk about the West, and then we'll get into the South, and then we'll get into the S&T bracket challenge because we got to do round 2, baby. The West, right? So you got the 1 seed Arizona, 2 Purdue, 3 Gonzaga. Do you think that this region is full of teasers?
Yeah, it's teams that like you just like I said earlier, they just always are like come up short, right? They do tease you.
Yeah.
I mean Arizona for one, and I want to call out this, but shout out the Long Island Sharks, by the way, Rod Strickland, if you remember him back in the day, what a great point guard he was.
Big shout out.
So I also, by the way, I think it's great that like Jerry McNamara is coaching with Siena and they're in the tournament, and so there's a lot of former guys that we grew up watching Shark that are, getting a chance to now coach. And, obviously, I don't know who PC will end up taking, but you talked about some of the, Ryan Gomes obviously on the staff of King and English. So it's great to see guys
There's no Memphis, but Penny Hardaway.
Right.
He's coming back.
So anyways, but yeah, Arizona, I think it really does shape up well for them. I would be worried if they draw Wisconsin. And Wisconsin can't sleep on High Point. You talked about High Point. This was a team that was in the dance last year. They're returning a lot of players. Wisconsin, though, is really battle tested. I think their guard play with Nick Boyd, John Blackwell, it's going to be a little too much for the High Point Panthers. And then they draw Arkansas, Jarius Akoff. I mean, we talked about how he's the type of player that is capable of getting hot enough and carrying a team to a Final Four. As much as you want to give the Rainbow Warriors of Hawaii respect, it's just hard to imagine Akoff and this Arkansas team getting picked off. Gonzaga, I think, has a pretty good draw. And I'm very curious. I think they could be the team that is capable of getting out of this region. I do worry about, Arizona. The last time they made a deep run, Wisconsin has picked them off before in the Sweet 16. So I think Wisconsin is capable of doing that against Arizona. I just don't trust that Arizona I mean, I don't really trust Wisconsin either, but I think the point is I don't trust a lot of teams in this region.
Yeah, I was going to say this region's like full of fibbers. Like,
I think I'm gonna go against the grain here. I'm gonna say Gonzaga. Will come out of the region. I really like Graham Ike. Obviously, Mark Few is extremely tested. This is a team that, I know they haven't really been battle tested in conference play, but St. Mary's is a really good team. Santa Clara is a good team. Obviously, they have representation in the tournament. They're going to drop Purdue, and I think that'll be a very interesting matchup. But I'm gonna take Gonzaga. I think that they come out of this. I think Gonzaga knocks out Wisconsin in the Elite Eight to make the Final Four out of this region.
Yeah, I like. Well, first, I think there could be a Sweet 16 matchup between Batanza and Akoff. And if that happens, I mean, let's talk about balling out, with all NBA eyes looking at you. And when I think of, what's funny too, I was thinking of Akoff recently, and when I think of his game, it reminds me of Sasser from Houston, right? The ability to score in bunches. Defensively, Arkansas is not the worst team defensively. They can hang their hat on the defensive end. Um, you know, and I just look at that team, right? And I see Arkansas, and then I see Wisconsin. Maybe Villanova in the second round can give Arizona some fits, right? Villanova's not proud this year. Unfortunately, they're not as good as they used to be, but the Jay Wright days. But when you look at Arizona, I look at possibly Arkansas, like I said, possibly. I mean, Utah State's on a run right now, right? With Calhoun, he's having a terrific year with those guys. But that's the thing about this region, man. And I tend to agree with you when it comes to Gonzaga, a team that just has experience and, has been there, and they're in a favorable region. When you look at it, they're a sneaky team to watch out for. But if I have all eyes on what's going to happen in this region, it's BYU and Arkansas in the Sweet 16. I can fully see that happening. When we talk about the South region, because you, my friend, are going to be live in the South. You got the number 1 seed Florida, number 2 seed Houston, who are, potentially going back into the championship again, potentially.
Yes.
And then you got the number 3 seed Illinois Fighting Illini.
And I don't want to discredit Vanderbilt. Obviously, they made a really good run in the SEC tournament. And I know you were giving the Ken Palm and say throw Ken Palm out the window, but if you give Ken Palm any love, Vanderbilt is a team that's sneaky, pretty good in the Ken Palm rankings on offense and defense. So if you do give that credence, Vanderbilt's a team that maybe can make some noise. I think it's very interesting because Vanderbilt and Florida, obviously Vanderbilt handled Florida in the SEC tournament, and I think they're going to match up again in the Sweet 16 here. I know McNeese is the darling. You look at the 5-12 upset. Can McNeese do it again? And Shaka Amir Khan. I'm sorry, what was it? Shaka Khan. Amir Khan. Can he do it? Can he do it again with those boys down at McNeese? And shout out McNeese. I met the loveliest couple, by the way, that was from McNeese. The 2 alumni. I met them in Providence at a bar after the game last year.
Yeah,
and they were great people. They talked about how the year before, this is the 3rd trip, 3 years in a row now, McNeese is in the dance. They talked about how the year before they were in Salt Lake City and how they loved Providence, and they thought Providence was a lot fun, more fun of a city. It was more, people were nicer to them. So shout out Providence, shout out McNeese, but sorry, Vanderbilt's taking you out. Shout out that couple that I met at the Biltmore Hotel.
Yeah, shout them out. Yeah, give them a shout, whoever you were, because
whoever they are.
Ticket doesn't remember your name.
I don't remember their names, but they were very lovely people. So yeah, I think Vanderbilt's going to take care of them. And I hate to say, I know I just gave them a lot of love for that, but Nebraska. By the way, sure, Nebraska has never won an NCAA tournament game, which is one of the fun facts that I've got to learn over the last 24 hours when the brackets came out.
Wow,
they're getting Troy. Yes, Nebraska has never won an NCAA tournament game, and this was the best season in program history that they've had. If you remember, Fred Hoiberg, who was a disaster in the NBA with the
that was
Chicago Bulls. He left Iowa State to go to the NBA. Disaster. But he's rebuilt that Nebraska program, the best season they've ever had. And I'm giving all this build up yet again to say I think the Troy, who's out of the Sun Belt, can knock them out. So I would look at that as a potential Cinderella team. Troy is really good on the interior. Nebraska does not have a lot of size. So I think Troy is going to be a tough matchup for them. At the end of the day, though, Vanderbilt, Florida rematch in the Sweet 16. I want to pick Vanderbilt again.
You don't have to pick yet. You don't have to pick yet. You got plenty of time to choose.
VCU over UNC is another one that I would look at as a potential upset in the first round. I also want to give out a shout out to Penn against Illinois. Penn has TJ Power, who dropped 44 points against Yale
Big score.
to get Penn into the tournament. And on top of that, I looked into this kid's background. He originally he's from Mass, Shrewsbury, Mass, went to Duke, then transferred from Duke to UVA, and now ends up at Penn.
Wow. That never
So
happens. Usually
right,
it's a build-up. Usually it's Penn to Virginia to Duke.
to Duke, right.
Yeah.
So he went Duke, Virginia, Penn. What it does tell me is he's clearly very bright, because those are three very good academic schools. But also he can apparently play, because dropping 40 points in a college game, especially in a big spot, hit a buzzer beater three to force overtime. But yeah, Illinois will obviously handle them. And then Houston is the team I have coming out of this region, Shark. I really like Kelvin Sampson's team. I think while they're not as good as they have been defensively, they have a much better offense, and I think that's what's kind of handicapped them in these recent. I mean, obviously last year they went on a huge drought, had to lead most of the game against Florida, and Florida did what they did all tournament, and that was come back late with Walter Clayton and those boys. So I think this year, no Clayton, Florida defensively can be had, and they shoot a lot of threes. And I know Florida can score, but man, Houston is just so good defensively. And I do think they're going to break through and come out of this region. So Houston would be playing in Houston, by the way.
Yes.
If it gets to that point.
Yeah.
So I like them to have that home court advantage and ride it. Give me the Cougars to get to the Final Four here.
Okay. So let's talk about this, because I didn't realize that this could potentially happen again. We got Lehigh as the number 16 seed.
Oh,
it could be deja vu all over again when CJ McCollum blew up the Duke Blue Devils, right?
Yep.
It could be the same thing with Florida dealing with that. And if you look at it, was Duke a winner before Lehigh? Did they win right before Lehigh, that exit?
I don't think so.
Because, that would come full circle. But my point is, you talked about it. Ever since, I don't know why this is the case, but it seems like, Walter Clayton, hell of a player last year, right? Dominant force, took over games, lights out, right? But you mentioned it. They turn over the ball a lot, Florida. They struggle from three this year. They're, I think, right around the 33% mark. They're not the best three-point shoot team. When you have that type of identity, when you want to shoot the ball every single time you dribble up, that's what Florida's makeup is. I don't know jack shit about Lehigh, but let me tell you. I'm going with the upset again. Lehigh is pulling a deja vu.
No, you're nuts. But I love it. Someone's got to be a Cinderella.
There's got to be something. There's got to be a Cinderella at some point. But North Carolina's on my mind. When I'm looking at the top matchups, Illinois. I mean, talk about Hagley and what he's been capable of doing.
Illinois is really good.
That kid's just filthy. But yeah, I think that I agree with you. Ticket two. When you talk about Mr. Consistency, it's Kelvin Sampson. That guy just has his team ready every single time he steps on the tournament floor. And regardless of their record, regardless of them, maybe not, as you mentioned, top tier defensively, they're still like probably top 30, top 40 defensive team in the country.
They're still a top 30 defensive team.
So it doesn't really matter from that standpoint, as long as you can lock up teams. Maybe give up 70, 75 instead of 60, 65. That in my eyes can still win your ball games. But again, if you're looking at the South region, if they're looking at the potential Final Four, well, they got to play a doghouse of the East. So that's what sucks. If you're looking at it, if you like Houston in this bracket, look who they have to go up against, coming out of the East. So it's going to be a mammoth of a tournament. We talked about all the different players in the mix, just to name, a few more. You talked about Braden Smith, 15.9 points per game, just a roster full of Jaden Bradley and Koa Pete. When you look at Koa Pete, he's averaging 13.8 points per game, shooting 55% from the field. Talk about Houston earlier. You got Flemings, 16 points, 5 rebounds per game.
And he's the X factor to me for Houston this year.
He absolutely is. Now, an X factor for me, when I look at UConn, it is Terrace Reed. That guy can body. That guy can do great defensive rebounder. He can block shots at a high level. He is the presence. And if you look at it, right, this is the point that I want to make, and this is why he is the key to this tournament when it comes to UConn. I found a cool stat by Evan Maya on Twitter. The Huskies are plus 11.5 points per 100 possessions better with him on the court. So what does that mean? That guy brings impact offensively. That guy brings impact defensively. So if I'm UConn, I'm trusting in my gut to have Terrace Reed on the court, and just name drop Philbin Jr. I mean, you want to talk about a dynamite scorer? 21 points per game as a sophomore. He effectively shot. He almost doubled his points per game last year as a freshman. So, there's going to be a lot of teams in the mix, obviously with March Madness bracket. But again, if I'm looking at it, you got some stars. You got some stars going to be on that court, every night. So that's something to look forward to. But any more final thoughts as we moved into S&T bracket challenge, since you're going to the game?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to obviously, like I said, see Florida live. I mean, they have a tremendous front court, and Chinyalu has been great. Condon, Thomas Haw, Lee, who transferred from Princeton, was really good. So I mean, they have a lot of players. They're the defending national champs. They're our favorite. A lot of people are picking them to maybe win it again.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see them live. But yeah, I mean, Texas Tech I'll be seeing, Clemson, Iowa, and Alabama, Hofstra. Is the other matchup. So those are before I get on.
Could be an upset there. Could be an upset.
I agree. I think Hofstra's a ripe for the upset there. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, my final thoughts on the track. I know is given my picks. So I obviously have UConn coming out of the East, knocking out Duke. I think the injuries with Foster were too much for Duke to overcome. So I'm looking at it. I'm sure people are going to see the UConn hat and they're going to go, oh, he's a homer. He's picking UConn. I got UConn and Houston matching up. And then I have Gonzaga and Iowa State. So I have Iowa State.
You got Iowa State and UConn. Let's just call it what it is. And then we can all understand who you're picking for the title.
I'm picky with my heart there, obviously. But if I'm being serious, I do think Houston would knock out UConn. And then Iowa State. So Iowa State, Houston, Big 12, all Big 12 title game would be my pick. And I have Houston winning it all. Kelvin Sampson finally getting over the edge.
Yeah, and before we get into S&T bracket challenge, I just want to bring this up too. I think when you're watching the tournament, we're not we wouldn't say we're college basketball experts.